All right, guys, it is time for our second episode of A Peek Inside the SEC. Allie Peek, TJ Pittinger, hanging out with you guys. It's a Monday night. Normally we do these on Sunday nights, but had to do some Christmas things with my family yesterday. TJ, what's going on?
I am just glad that the playoffs are here. We'll talk about that later in the week on Wednesday night. So if you're watching this, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you don't miss it. We'll talk about that later. So we'll save this show. But before we get into that, I am super excited the playoffs here. I'm not even a fan of the 12-team playoff, but I think it's going to be fun.
Listen, I'm just ready. I feel like we've had a football lull here and ready for more. We're going to have lots of football in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, bowl season starts. Florida plays this week.
They do.
Are you excited about that? Somewhat. Are you going to the game?
Still undetermined at this moment. I have to pull the kids out early from school. It's their last day. So trying to kind of figure out where everybody's Christmas parties lie and things in class. But potentially it's in our town. We live in Tampa, obviously, both of us. So maybe making the trip. And, listen, a couple months ago, it did not seem possible for the Gators to even be bowl eligible. So kind of excited for the opportunity for them to go 8-5.
Yeah. Let's jump into things tonight. A bunch to talk about. No bowl game for me to talk about, but we'll talk about yours here in a little bit. But the transfer portal. Let's talk about that and the craziness that it is. Yeah. LSU picks up a quarterback from Mississippi State, Michael Van Buren.
Yeah.
How about this one? Kevin Coleman Jr. on his fourth school in 4 years, going to Missouri.
So
I will say,
crazy.
All right, on this one, every time he has gone to
taking a step up.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, Louisville, Mississippi State is, I don't know that that's a mass, I know it's SEC, but that's, I don't know. There was a coaching change there, though, so things maybe make sense. But he has taken a step up each time. But still, 4 in 4 years is a little bit crazy. Like, can we just call it what it is?
The saying, like, it's not you, it's me, that may fit right here. It's not you, it's him. Because I don't know. Kids these days are built differently. I don't understand the concept. I wouldn't even want to move 4 times. Like I always tell my husband, Eric, if we're ever moving again, you are paying someone to pack up this entire house. I am not lifting a finger. We'll probably be in this house till I die because I made that statement. But like, could you imagine just moving 4 times? And now you're about to go from Mississippi to Missouri. Like, that's not an easy move.
Yeah, and neither one of those places, sorry for any Mississippi State or, Missouri fans. Louisville's cool.
Starkville,
Yeah, like this, I don't know. Missouri, all
I
of
have no
it,
interest to live anywhere in the state of Mississippi and probably not anywhere in the state of Missouri either. Although I want to visit the Ozarks at one point.
The bag has probably gotten bigger each time, if we're being honest. So that probably helps the move. How about this one? Bama quarterback Dylan Longren considering UGA. This isn't as big of a rivalry, I think, as maybe the one that you experienced. We talked about on the last episode with ETN and one we'll get to later. But the Bama to UGA flip is always interesting to me.
The in-conference flips are just bizarre to me. I can wrap my head around moving up conferences. You're going from the Sun Belt to the ACC or the SEC or whatever. I can wrap my head around that. I can even wrap my head around Big 12 to SEC. It is hard for me to understand how somebody could go from Bama to Georgia, or like we saw Florida to Georgia, or some of these. I mean, we've got Oklahoma to Auburn. I don't know. Like I said, these kids are built differently. This is not something that my generation would have ever let happen, but I don't know. They're going to play each other at least once, probably more, basically every single year. I don't know.
Auburn gets Jackson Arnold from Oklahoma.
Great pickup for them, I think.
Yeah, I think that helps them a ton. Interestingly enough, Oklahoma beat Auburn earlier this year, but I don't think Jackson Arnold was playing in that game. I think he had gotten benched, and they kind of did the quarterback shuffle thing there at Oklahoma. Eric Singleton Jr., a wide receiver from Georgia Tech, he's probably one of the best wide receivers in the country. Mm-hmm. Auburn or Ole Miss, it seems like, certainly programs that are willing to pay up.
But also I think there's more of an opportunity for the spotlight. I don't like Georgia Tech had a great season, but I think Georgia Tech was probably pretty close to their ceiling this year. And especially in terms of attention and spotlight, I think that it's going to be easier, to be on that stage if you play for Auburn or you play for Ole Miss. The odds that Georgia Tech are making the playoffs are probably pretty small. So couple bigger playing opportunities with bigger bags, and it definitely makes sense.
Yeah, and yeah, I think you have. I mean, you have two coaches. I mean, Brent Pry or not Brent Pry. I'm sorry, Brent Key at Georgia Tech. I mean, I think they could be an okay, but like they can be an 8-9 win
I don't
program
think Brent
in the
Key's
ACC.
there that much longer, if I had to guess. I think he's going to be one of the hot names,
I
for
could see
CB
that. Yeah,
searches the
but
next
even
couple.
if you're just thinking next year, like they like to run the ball, they're not a
Sure.
super pass heavy team, and you're going to
Conservative. You think of Georgia Tech, generally, you think of a conservative
yeah,
team. If you're a wide receiver, you go to Ole Miss where they're going to throw
or
87
Hugh Freeze. Yeah,
billion, yards a game, or same thing, Auburn. I mean, that's got to be appealing, right? You're wanting film for the NFL.
Ole Miss seems to love this name, Princewell Umanmielen, Nebraska edge commits there. Their second Umanmielen in as many years.
Did we figure,
Um,
are they related? Do we just both have this insanely long last name? What is going on here?
yeah, I don't
The
know the
first
answer to
name
that.
is even similar. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, Barry and Brown at LSU always super hot in the portal. They
Mhm.
pick up Barry and Brown had the kick return
Yeah.
against Florida
Well,
this year.
and they got Dane Keys in the transfer portal too, right?
Yeah, which looks like he could be headed to Ole Miss. Obviously, Kentucky losing a couple of wide
Yeah,
receivers. I don't know
you
what they'll
guys.
look like next year. Auburn gets Malik Murphy. I'm sure he'll start for them.
Yeah.
Malik Murphy, I think, was kind of pushed out so that they could get the Tulane quarterback.
Yeah.
And so I think Auburn upgraded it. I'm sorry. I think, yeah, Auburn upgraded there
Mhm.
with the quarterback pickup as well. And then the last one we'll talk about real quick, and then we'll just talk about the portal in general. LSU gets Jack Pyburn,
Yeah.
Florida edge, who was a pretty productive player for Florida. It sounds like Florida may or may not have wanted to, dance with some negotiation type stuff, but LSU is certainly loaded up more. And another, certainly not carrying the weight of somebody going to Florida State or Georgia, but another rival.
Yeah.
Although I will say, Florida is like the school that I think has like 17 rivalries on their schedule. So like,
Right.
if they're going to go in the SEC, like Florida is everyone's rival. It feels like, right? Or Florida sees everything as a big rivalry.
I mean, I think that Florida gets pretty much everybody they play his best shot. But I would, as a Florida fan, I think that there are a handful we consider. LSU is absolutely one of them. And that rivalry kind of intensified. We had a game move because of the hurricane, and there were some snippiness back and forth between athletic directors that kind of continue to fuel the fire. But I've always considered LSU a rival. I think Tennessee, I think Florida State, I think Georgia. I mean, those would probably be what I consider Florida's rivals. But yeah, I mean, I think this is interesting for a couple of reasons. One, because we don't know what the real story is here. We don't know. I mean, the people that reported what he supposedly asked for are generally people whose word I value and I take as, speaking from fact. But it also, seems like a big ask for somebody who was a really good role player this year, but I think is not necessarily the star of the defense. I think he really came on strong the end of the year. And I think the fact that Napier could trust him, he was a Gator for life. You weren't worried about him getting in any kind of trouble. Any of that stuff was definitely add value for him. It's just, I don't know. It's weird. Napier came out and said all that wonderful stuff about him. And, then we get reports that like, okay, Florida's not off the table. I know Corey Raymond is at LSU, who didn't directly coach Pyburn, but, on the defensive side of the ball, could have had a relationship with him. I don't know. And then, TJ, one of the things you and I have talked about is that there were all these reports that Florida was not going to be, you know, outbid essentially for players in the portal or in high school. And I don't know who made that statement and put that rumor out there, but I don't know that there's a single thing we can point to in high school recruiting or transfer portal recruiting so far that would back up that statement, right? That sounds kind of like just a nameless, faceless rumor that got floated out there in hopes that it would make the fans happy, because I don't know that we have any evidence of that being the case. I'm not sitting here saying we should pay him if he was asking $45,000 a month or whatever. And I also don't agree with guaranteeing playing time for anybody. I think you earn all of it and your play on the field dictates whether or not you get more, but I don't know. It's just interesting.
Yeah, or you could just say that anybody that Florida's missed on with that reporting, like they just haven't really wanted. That's the easy spin for that, right? If we
Yeah,
missed on them,
I mean,
then
I
we didn't pay
guess
them.
if the number wasn't ridiculous, I think it's weird that Florida gets outbid by LSU. If the number is ridiculous, then you know what? Go get your bag, because this is not somebody who's projected to go super high in the NFL draft. I would be surprised, and listen, I hope it happens, but I'd be surprised if he had some long NFL career. So I get the concept of strike while the iron is hot, right? And if that's not Florida, maybe it's somewhere else. But at some point, all of these schools have limits. So looking at Florida State and the people that they're signing and what their roster currently is, if I find it hard to believe they have an extra $45,000 a month lying around for Jack Pyburn. But I don't know.
I think so. I don't think, as far as the playing time and some of the other requests that were reported for him specifically, I don't know that that's tough, right? Like, it's tough to guarantee that. I don't know that $500,000 though for a starting defensive end in the SEC is outrageous. But so I don't think the number itself is outrageous. Just in my, like, I'm not in NIL negotiations,
but
like,
warranted though. I mean, he had 2 sacks this season.
I think when these kids are asking for money, it's a mix. It's just like coaches, right? It's a mix of what they've done and a mix of what you project them to do. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I think if his thought is, hey, I played really well at the end of last season, if I'm going to start for you a starting defensive end in a top 15 program of all time, a top program of all time in the SEC, I deserve $500,000. Or I think 540 is how it worked out. But so I don't think that number. Again, I don't think that ask is ridiculous. I think the ask that's kind of ridiculous, if all of this is true, again, is the guaranteed playing time, the guaranteed starting spot, like all those things.
Yeah,
I don't know that he had that at LSU either.
Yeah, Pyburn put out something on social media this week where it was like a picture of a private plane, and it said something about, I don't know. Basically, he was disputing the playing time request or whatever, like basically making it seem like that part didn't happen, didn't dispute all the rest of it. So, I don't know. He hasn't really spoken on it. Napier, everything he has said had been glowing about Pyburn. I go back and forth like, man, get your bag. But I also would love for people to be loyal to the schools that they say they grew up, bleeding for. And I think that he probably was going to get a big renegotiation from what he got paid last year. And, but I don't know. I heard a really interesting thing today, and I don't know if this is something you've ever heard, TJ, but I heard one of the newest kind of trends in college football right now is that basically agents are picking a name, let's say Jack Pyburn, and they're calling around to programs and they're saying, hey, if I can get Pyburn to transfer to your school, what would it be worth to you? And, kind of crowdsourcing, finding out what that number is, and then going to the player and saying, hey, if you're willing to jump in the transfer portal, I can promise you'll get X number, per month. And I thought that was really interesting, totally shady. But, that does make me wonder if maybe that's where some of these kids are grabbing some of these numbers from too.
Yeah, I think so. I think that definitely happens. And I think like there are agents that are doing it on behalf of the kid. Like a kid wants to know what's out there, or a kid's team or family wants to know what's out there. And then I think there are some agents that just do it proactively. Like, in no way, like I'm not trying to start any rumors and I'm not trying to, but like, I think he is fully locked in. But if you don't think that like whoever Lagway's agent wasn't at least listening to insane offers from other programs. I'm not saying DJ would ever consider it. I am trying to preface it so much before somebody starts like, TJ said this was happening. But like, if you're his agent, you're doing him a disservice because let me tell you something. If Ohio State was going to offer him $10 million, like he should pack his stuff tomorrow and go and take $10 million. You know what I'm saying? And I'm throwing a ridiculous number out there, but like, I'm telling you, all of these kids' agents are at least listening to the number. Yeah. And now he might take that number back and the kid might say like, no way, I'm locked in. I'm not doing this. No. But I mean, the agents are all listening because they get a cut of it. Like, why wouldn't you? Like if you're, like they don't have any loyalty to these schools. They don't care who plays where or whatever. They just want the biggest, same reason you or I would want money, right? Like
right.
We want what's best for us. I want to ask you about Florida in a second in the portal, but Ole Miss, LSU, both making big splashes already. LSU has the number 1 portal class again right now, and it's early, right? Like it's only been 8 days that the portal's been open. But if you had to pick, like I'm going with LSU is going to have the top SEC portal class. Do you want to go? You want to take a wild card? Do you want to take?
I think it's LSU at the moment. I do think that can change, but for the portal, it seems to be like essentially the exact opposite of high school recruiting, right? Like you want to strike immediately and early, whereas high school recruiting, you want to be that last person they're on the phone call with. You want to be the last official visit. You want to be the last eye contact they make before they walk on that stage and pick a hat, all of those things. Whereas with transfer portal recruiting, you want to be the first official visit. And then if you let them leave your campus without a commitment, probably not a great sign for you. And I think LSU has done such a great job of getting the people that they want in the building immediately, like the second visits were allowed to happen, and getting those commits from those guys. And speediness is where it's at in the portal.
So that leads perfectly into this. What are your thoughts on Florida's first week? Just, it's been a little slow. Like, were you expecting more? Do you think they're just kind of slow playing some stuff, trying to figure things out, or where are your thoughts on that?
I think what we've seen the last couple of years from Coach Napier appears to be what we're seeing right now, which is they take a slow and methodical approach to everything. And I think that personally, I would have loved if we moved a little bit faster. So far, we've got a punter coming from Michigan, which I asked Eric about him. He's like, I haven't watched anything about him, but I saw that he was like 8th or 9th in the Big Ten. So like, I don't know if that's, overly promising there. But Florida's in a situation where they're losing a senior punter, and you want some options here. And your options can either be a veteran guy that you can send out there and trust in SEC situations, or you've got a new freshman coming in who is a really highly rated guy who you're going to see if that learning curve is there and he can immediately start. As a punter and a kicker, as a coach, your dream is that they start for you for 4 years. You get to save some scholarships. You get consistency on special teams. Like my husband played for 4 years. Then after him, Chaz Henry for 4 years. You can go down the line. If you're doing it right, you get your punter for 4 years. So does this guy come to Florida and not play? Potentially, because we have a great freshman coming in. But because it's hard to trust 18-year-old freshmen, it's not a bad backup plan. I think it's weird that it was, the first priority at this moment. And then, Florida's missed on a couple wide receivers. There's a lot of guys in this portal that would have been great to make a splash with, right? Florida needs 1 or 2 veteran wide receivers to jump on board. And I trust Florida's evaluations at wide receiver. So I'm not nervous, because I think even if we wait, you think about the guys that Florida has landed on the last 2 years in the portal class that have been incredibly successful. And none of those are guys that, signed on the day the portal opened or whatever. So I think we'll be fine there. But I would love to see some urgency.
Yeah. No, I get that. There will be another crop. There will be guys that jump in the portal due to the playoff.
Sure.
That said,
they're all probably telling themselves we're just waiting to get players.
It does make you feel better to say those things. And my fan base is doing the same exact thing. And there are a lot of fan bases all over the country doing the same exact thing.
Yeah.
And I would tell you, most of them, that most of the teams in the playoff pay a lot of money and have a lot of success. And so why are they picking your school, not Florida specifically, just everyone? How many kids, and there will be some, how many difference makers are leaving playoff teams to go to non-playoff
And that's the thing, is that the guys that are left that will be jumping will probably not be anybody that's a star in the playoffs. So they're going to be somebody who's warming that bench, and you're going to have to be making a better eval, than the team that they currently play for, is what you're going to be telling yourself if you want to sign them. But it's going to be fun to watch. I'm interested to see how Florida does. There's a long off season here with this windows. We'll see what we got here. But everybody that's watching right now, we really appreciate it. Peek Inside the SEC has only been around for a couple of weeks here. This is our second live show, but TJ and I love hanging out and talking trash and talking about the best conference in all of college football. So make sure that you are subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any of our updates and video releases as they come out. There's going to be so much college football to talk about in the next couple of weeks. Right now, what I want to talk about a little bit, though, is Oklahoma and Texas. So, TJ, these teams are added this year. Obviously, storied tradition, Oklahoma and Texas. They, bring a lot of history with them, right? They have brand recognition. They don't need the SEC for that brand recognition. They had brand recognition. And, the rich get richer, essentially, is the way it was looked at when they joined the SEC. Do you think they were good addition to the conference?
So my take on this is that they were good additions, big picture, right? They brought in more money to the SEC. They were part of some of the larger televised games. Even before Oklahoma started kind of trending downward, the Oklahoma-Tennessee game was really the first one of the first big SEC games that we got this year. Obviously, the Texas-Georgia stuff was huge ratings-wise as well. And then you move Oklahoma-Texas into being one of the biggest rivalries in the country into the conference as well. So I think long-term, they were a good addition. I think this year, and then maybe again next year too, with the current format we have, which will change mostly because of what's happened this year and what might happen next year, I think Oklahoma and Texas probably cost the SEC at least one spot in the playoff. I think that kind of the idea of having your cake and eat it too. Yeah, you want the best conference, and we all know the SEC was the best conference before these two teams were added. Sure. But you want the best conference, and with that is going to come a little bit more of the cannibalization of that conference. And I mean, we can call it a spade. Like if Texas wasn't in the conference, somebody else would, like there would still be 3 SEC teams in, right? Like Bama would be in, right? So, Texas didn't really cost them a spot, but Oklahoma probably cost them a spot by being in this year, right? And I mean, shoot, if they'd have given South Carolina Texas's kind of cakewalk schedule that they had, South Carolina would be in the playoff right now too. Like anybody in the SEC, I mean, Florida would have been.
Well, Oklahoma had Alabama right at the end. We would have had 4 SEC teams in.
I mean, Florida would have probably been 6-2 in the SEC with Texas's schedule. I mean, let's just call it what it is, right? Like, so I think it's tough to, I mean, this year specifically, I don't think it helped the SEC. In fact, I think it hurt the SEC. Now, from a monetary standpoint, they made, the conference made more money.
Sure.
Did they, but was it worth it for this year? Now, I think later on it will be fine. And the cream will always rise to the top. But I think this year it kind of hurt the SEC.
Yeah. I agree. I think that the SEC was already cannibalizing themselves before Texas and Oklahoma joined the conference. But I think if the playoff committee looked at things differently, we maybe wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation, right? I think SEC fans in general kind of feel like the playoff committee looked more at straight wins and losses instead of factoring in the cannibalization that was going on. And, you even saw athletic directors make comments about like, well, why do we schedule this way if you're not going to get, kind of a feather in your cap for doing it? And that does, probably give SEC fans and, maybe the commissioner, the powers that be, a little bit of pause, because I don't know that that's the way that they expected the committee to look at things this way. Now, will the committee look at things that way moving forward? I don't know. I think there'll be some tweaks to this playoff format, and maybe those benefit the SEC. And then we're back to like, this is great that they're here because they are going to, get us another spot. But I can see where fans would be like, ooh, this year, maybe it wasn't the best addition.
So I want to, and I am never, which I'm about to do it, I'm never going to be one that tries to defend the committee. But I don't so much blame the committee for this because the committee ranked Alabama 11th. Like the committee put
it's the
Alabama
getting in of
the format is really the issue. Not the committee said they're one of the best 12 teams.
Yeah.
The committee didn't set the format. These commissioners did.
Sure.
Right? The SEC,
and that's probably part of what will get tweaked down the road.
Right. The committee still, now, you could have an argument that the committee did still say that they valued SMU more than.
Yeah, because the committee could have put them anywhere they wanted. If they were trying to save Alabama and play within the rules, shoot, they could have put Alabama 8th. They could have, whatever.
But the committee did, for all intent, like the format to me is more to blame.
12, yes.
Which the SEC and the Big Ten had the largest influence, and it benefited the Big Ten. But like Greg Sankey, coming out and saying like, well, his exact kind of storyline to Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports was, well, we agreed to a format that was for 4 equitable conferences. And we thought that would be the best format for 4 equitable conferences, or 5.
We didn't have 4 equitable conferences or 5 equitable conferences.
It was way closer in like 2019, 2020 than it is now.
Sure.
And so, but Greg Sankey's the one that said that, and then literally 6 months after the playoff format was decided, he added Texas and Oklahoma. Like, he's the one that
Yeah.
started this whole realignment thing. And so,
Sure.
like, again, it's a cliche, but you can't have your cake and eat it too and say, like, well, I set up, or I was the biggest part of setting up this college football playoff to be for a 5-conference system.
Right.
And then at the same time, basically destroy that 5-conference system. And I don't think he's wrong about adding Texas and Oklahoma, but
Right.
it's certainly a situation where it's like, well, I didn't know that the 2-year-olds were going to make a mess with that ice cream, but I am the one that gave it to them.
But
You
I
know,
gave
like,
them the ice cream because they
yeah.
told me they'd be good.
So it's a little bit, to
Yeah.
me, it's a little bit on him. You know, not just him. He wasn't the only commissioner, but he's the one that came out and said it. And I'm like, hey, dog, you're the one that did this.
Right. Right. No, I mean, I don't disagree. And I think some of these things are better in theory than they are in practice. And we literally are going to kind of have to screw them up to be able to fix them later on. And, you know, one of the things, I think you and I have talked about this before, another tweak. I mean, I think it's crazy that all the teams that get a bye don't get a benefit of having a home game during this, that they all play on neutral site games. I think that that's something we'll see change going on, because the amount of revenue that they're missing out on being, you know, injected into their small towns, not to mention the reward to your season ticket holders and your, you know, rabid fans that go to all of those games, and just the kind of, you know, electricity that these playoff games, I think, are going to bring to the campuses that host them. I think that's something that's going to change.
Yeah. Also, too, just the idea that because you won an inferior conference, this is not the AFC North and the NFC South and like where there's parity and stuff. Like, the idea that you won the Mountain West and so you get to be above like you get a bye and Texas doesn't,
Yeah.
or even, you know, look at the, like, I'll rag on them. The fact that Clemson won the ACC, now they didn't get the bye, right? So, you know, not a perfect, you know, example, but like the fact that you could win the ACC or win the Big 12, and that's not like, that's somehow more valuable than finishing second in the SEC or the Big 10. Like, that's not, you know, nobody in the world thinks that Boise State or Arizona State are better teams than Texas or Penn State.
Right.
But for some reason, we gave those teams buys, and I mean, you know, credit to them. They did what they needed to do within the format to get it. But I don't know. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Just rank the teams 1 through 12 and go.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think for sure. And I think, honestly, can we use the BCS format to get it?
I'd be fine with it.
I mean, I would love that.
What about this? What about Texas coming in year 1 and nearly winning it? Is that good or bad for the perception of the SEC? Missouri came in their first couple of years and also went to the SEC championship. Texas, they won it last year, but really for the last 12 years, they've been pretty meh in the Big 12. Is that good, bad, and different? Like, just thoughts around that?
You know, two separate thoughts there, kind of. You know, Missouri came in and went, but Missouri, you know, didn't particularly play it close in either one of those. And I think some easy scheduling maybe made that an easier walk in there. They've yet to win it. Texas A&M has yet to win it in, you know, the 10 plus years that they both have been in. I think that Texas is a national powerhouse. So then coming in and then getting the gift of a schedule that they got, is not that surprising that they're there. They've lost to Texas twice. You know, I don't think it's good or bad, if that makes sense. I just think that Texas is a national brand, had a really good program, has more money than God. And so a program that should absolutely be killing it in the transfer portal era. You know, I don't know that we can look at the years prior to last year and we can say, like, okay, well, maybe they didn't have great relationship builders in place, which is what it used to take to be successful in college football. But at this moment, mostly what it takes is money. And there is no shortage of that anywhere in the state of Texas. So they probably should be the ones winning everything because they're the ones that can afford to win it all. But you know, I don't think it helps or hurts the conference. I just think it's a strong conference top to bottom. Whoever gets the luckiest scheduling that year is going to have a tiny bit of a leg up. I think that happened for Texas. Interesting to see how they do, in the playoffs. But guys, I want to take a second and thank you all for hopping on and joining us, checking out a peek inside SEC football. TJ and I are so excited to be working on this channel. We have known each other for years, have talked a lot of smack about college football on the internet, and excited for this to continue. Make sure you are subscribed to a peek inside SEC football, and we want to hear your comments. So make sure that you put them down in the comment section in the chat. We would love to hear from you guys, but we appreciate all your support and we hope we have it going forward as well.
All right, let's talk about this Heisman. Travis Hunter wins it. 0 SEC candidates in the top 10. What's your immediate reaction to that?
I think this is a year where there was a lot of parity in the SEC. And I also think we kind of cannibalize each other a lot. And so I think that probably adds to it. I don't know that there is a player that there was just such a star that I'm shocked that they weren't, right up there in New York. And I think that when you look at, you look at Colorado, or you look at Boise State, you look at some of these situations and they're kind of the star within their conference. And I think that does make it a little bit easier to garner attention. But I thought this was a great Heisman class. I think that all of those guys up on the stage were incredibly impressive in their own rights. I think it's interesting because I don't know that Travis Hunter is who I would have voted for. I would love to see voting done by coaches and then voting done by writers to see what the differences were in how they would vote. Because I do think that, Travis Hunter is the writer's favorite because everyone's like, oh my gosh, he's playing both ways. And he's really good at playing both ways, right? Like he's electric on the field. We don't usually see two-way guys in college football. He's put up good numbers, but his team was so-so, right? And then I think you look at Ashton Gentry, who also put up incredible numbers, set some huge records this year. But if you remove him from his team, Boise State is a completely different team. Right? Like they're not in the playoffs. They're not. His value to his team seems to be a lot higher than Travis Hunter's is to his. And that's not to say he's not the best player on Colorado's team, but Colorado is a average to good team with him on it. Right?
Yeah. I mean, but I don't think that's what the award is, right? Like who's most valuable. I think we sometimes factor that into the way we think about it, but I don't think the award is like who's the most important to their team. This team goes from average to bad.
Generally, it's been a factor. Not always. I think back to when Tebow won it, the year that they were in the Citrus Bowl against Michigan, and I think they won 8 games that year or something like that.
It's just most outstanding player, which is very subjective. But I mean, to me, I would have voted for Hunter first and Genty second. But I mean, to me, Hunter was the most outstanding player.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's subjective still, right? And so.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think everybody sitting up there was incredibly impressive. I think there was a lot of individual stars in college football this year, and I can see an argument why any one of them should have won it. And I don't want to take anything away from Travis Hunter because I think he's an incredible player. I think he's going to make a massive bag in the NFL. Listening to his speech was so heartwarming. I've never seen him be anything but really genuine. And his relationship with Deion Sanders, I think, is really, really sweet. And, I don't want to take anything away from him at all.
Except the Heisman.
No, I'm not saying I want to take it away. Not who I would have voted
for. Back to the SEC for a second. They had 6 of the top 10 preseason favorites. Beck second, Ewers third, Jalen Milroe fourth, Jackson Dart fifth, Nico at Tennessee seventh, and Garrett Nussmeier eighth.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting. I think that part of it was the cannibalization you talked about. Part of it was also just underwhelming quarterback play. Like Beck was really bad at times. Milroe was really bad at times. Jackson Dart, certainly, you lose 3 games, you lose to Kentucky and Florida in games you're double-digit favorites in, you're going to lose. That's just what's going to happen, right? And once you fall off, it's hard to get that back. Nico, very up and down, and then Nussmeier at LSU just didn't put up the numbers. Yeah.
Wins and losses, your value to your team matters for Dart, but it doesn't matter for Hunter?
What do you mean?
Well, you said like you lose these games that you shouldn't lose. I mean, that's not on him. He's part of the team. Colorado doesn't have, this incredible record either.
I
But
think quarterback. I do. Yeah, I do think quarterbacks are held to a little bit different
yeah,
standard
a
for
different
sure. I
standard.
think wins are attached to it.
I think that I would consider the quarterback play as a whole in the SEC, but certainly the guys that you mentioned was pretty bipolar this year. I don't think you can look no further than Carson Beck's two halves against Alabama. He looked like a deer in the headlights the first half he played them. He couldn't get out of his own way. He looked terrified. He looked completely out of sorts. And then he came in that second half and just like laser focused, and he almost got the job done, digging himself out of an insanely massive hole that they had dug the first half of the game. And, I think Ewers, uh, underwhelming maybe is a better word for him. I think that he also was hurt some this year, but I think he got the job done, but maybe not in the most impressive way that we thought it was going to happen. And Milroe, same thing, roller coaster play, right? These guys, when they're good, they're damn good. But we saw them be bad more than we expected this season as well. And Nico's young, I think he'll come along, but and Nussmeier was completely underwhelming this entire year. And Dart, I think back to the end of the Florida game, the amount of times that he threw interceptions or, tried to, and they got called back or whatever was kind of wild for the play that we expect out of him.
I saw a early preseason kind of 2025 Heisman list, and DJ Lagway was on it. Is that a little too much for next year, or are you buying in this early?
I mean, I think DJ can handle the pressure of that, but I think Florida fans would rather like let's pump the brakes on that a little bit. I think that he is sensational. I think that when you look at freshman quarterbacks that played meaningful snaps across the board, there's not going to find one who did as good a job as DJ Lagway, and he did it in the hardest conference, helping to dig his team out of a really big hole that was dug earlier in the season, and help save his coach's job at least for another year. And so I think he did a spectacular job. I think he's a great player. I think it's way too early to talk about Heisman, but I would be shocked if DJ Lagway doesn't end up in New York at some point in his college career. Will it be when he's a true freshman? I don't know. Some of that will also depend on the pieces that Florida is able to get in place and how fast some of these young guys develop, because he can't do it alone.
Yeah. And like we said, quarterback play, a lot of it has to do with wins and losses. It's essentially what dropped. I mean, Cam Ward was a favorite until they started losing, right? Yeah. Like losing games impacts it for sure. And Florida will need to win a lot of games for him to have a chance, or he'll have to put up like
Tebow
record-breaking
year 20,
yeah,
20 and
Jaden Daniels type
back.
stats from last year, where there really just was no clear-cut favorite.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Interesting to see. Who do you have give me a pick for 2025 Heisman in December of 2024?
Oh my gosh. I have no idea. I mean, you've got to think people will very soon start talking about Arch Manning as a possibility here, right? Like I can't imagine that his name doesn't start getting floated around, but shoot, that is way too early. What about Eugene Wilson? Maybe he'll become the next Percy Harvin for Florida.
I'm going to go Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State. That's my pick.
All right.
I'm going to make you lock in Arch. I'm not going Eugene Wilson. I'm not letting you pick that. I'm going to give you a better chance at it. If Wilson gets there and Lagway doesn't, that'll be insane. So,
yeah.
All right. If you're watching this, if you're listening later on a replay, make sure you hit the subscribe button. We're going to go live on Wednesday night to talk about the playoffs at 9 p.m. Again, hit the subscribe button if you have not already. Before the playoffs, we talked about this. Florida plays Tulane on Friday afternoon in their bowl game, the Gasparilla Bowl in Tampa, due to the kind of damage that was done there at the Trop. Yep. We've seen this before, and what I do wonder, Florida, credit to everybody that is playing in this game for Florida. Mm-hmm. Not a lot of opt-outs. I don't know how many, there's only a couple of guys that. How many draft picks do you think Florida will have? Just a handful, maybe. Like I don't think.
I'm trying to rack my brain. I don't think anybody has opted out, at least not publicly.
Yeah. I don't think they have a lot of there's no top 10 pick that's about to sit out or anything.
No, but I mean, I think honestly, anybody who is projected first 2 days that doesn't sit out, I find that a win for Florida, right? And I do think that that's some of the culture that Napier has built there.
What do you think about the motivation factor of this? Like, I tend to think that like bowl games, when you're playing a crappy opponent, you're playing
Mhm,
before Christmas, you're playing a weekday game, right? At three
mhm.
o'clock on a Friday. What do you like? Tulane is in a weird spot, and we'll talk about them in a minute. But
Yeah.
what do you think about Florida's motivation in this game?
I agree with you that I think in general, when you have an opponent that you or your fan base maybe views as inferior, that like that makes it harder to get up for it. I think playing a bowl game the second you finish your exams before Christmas is hard to get up for. But I do think that this team feels like they have a lot to prove still. I think that they feel like you know, I think that they feel like fans kind of quit on them a little bit during the season, and I think maybe deservedly so, right? This team was definitely didn't look like it was headed in the right direction after 3 weeks in. And I think that they would love to get to 8-5. I think Napier would love to get to 8-5. We talked last summer about the fact that if Florida won 8 games, that would be considered a massive success for the season, given the schedule and given the current roster and stuff. And so I do think there's some motivation to get there. I wish it was a different opponent. No offense to Tulane at all, but I think it's you're playing a Michigan, you're even a Michigan State or a Oklahoma State, like somebody that you view as maybe an equal that you don't get to see often. That maybe there's a little bit more of a motivating factor. But listen, we just got to take down the green wave now, I guess.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the motivation factor wouldn't normally be there. Like if Florida had bigger expectations
Yeah,
coming into this year,
yeah,
and Florida was trying to make a thought they could make an SEC championship or thought they could sneak into the playoff or really just even if they thought they were going to be like a 9-10 win team and they finished at 7-5.
yeah,
And I think that would be different. I think they would come into this game and for all intent, they'd probably lose it, right? Like it'd
yeah.
probably be like the UCF game in Tampa a few years ago where you
Right.
just look, we don't want to be here. This opponent is trash.
This is
This
a
game is
disappointment.
trash.
Whereas
This
opposed to
season
right now, it's like, damn, we made one.
yeah, we made a bowl that nobody thought we could make.
Yeah.
And I do think that because it's a bunch of young guys, a lot of young guys. There's some veteran guys on the team too, but it's a lot of first and second year players that are on this team, especially Lagway. I think that there's more motivation to go out there and continue to build for next year. And so
Yeah.
I think the motivation factor will be super high. Like I like Florida. It's opened up at like 11, 12. It's already all the way up to 14
Yeah.
or more now. Like, and I think it'll keep moving up. Like it wouldn't surprise me at all if Florida was like a 16, 17 point favorite by the time this thing kicks off. Cause
Yeah.
I do think they're going to go out and try and prove a point and make a statement. And,
Yeah.
we'll see how successful they are with that. I'd be pretty surprised if they weren't able to win. On Lagway specifically, obviously he struggled with a little bit of an injury this year,
Yeah.
kept him out of the Texas game, and obviously had to come out of the Georgia game late. Do you think they'll be? I don't know if you've heard anything on that, but do you think they'll be pretty conservative with him because, for all intent and purposes, the game really doesn't matter? I mean, certainly you're going to sell it if you win. It's kind of a high reward, low risk. You lose, you just say you don't care, and you win, then it's great news for
When
everybody.
you're 8-5. Um,
But do you think they'll be careful with him somewhat?
I hope not, honestly. I mean, I don't think we'll see him be any more careful than they were the last couple of games of the season. I think he's had a little bit of time off now to continue to rehab that a little bit more, and hopefully he's in a pretty good place with it. I don't think doing things that changes his game is a great decision for Florida. If he's injured enough that he shouldn't be playing, which he's not, then he shouldn't be playing. But if he's not, then you need to let him play his game, which I do, to Florida's credit, think that that's what they've done since he's come back from injuries, kind of let him play his game. I mean, they did create that strap to help give support to his hamstring. And obviously that kind of just as a side note to it, did cause some mobility limitations. Wasn't they weren't trying to limit his mobility by putting him in it, but that was a side effect of putting him in it. I don't know if he'll be wearing that or not for the bowl game yet. Have not heard. But I think we're going to see the same DJ Lagway we've seen the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, like I don't think they'll run him. I mean, yeah, that was kind of my thought. Like they're not going to try and run him
Well,
intentionally like they did earlier in the year, but just more so protect him that way. I didn't mean like trying
it's
to
kind
limit
of
him
interesting
here,
because I talk to his high school coach every once in a while, and one of the things that he has stressed is that DJ doesn't picture himself as a dual threat quarterback. He pictures himself as a pocket passer who has some wheels, And so I think this, like, there's almost a misconception about him that, like, if he doesn't see anything right away, he's just going to take off with his feet. I don't think that he wants that to be his identity. And that doesn't mean that Florida didn't use him as a change of pace at the beginning when Graham Mertz was healthy, because that was maybe an easier way to kind of transition him into the playbook. But I don't think that that's not how he wants to be viewed by the college football world as a dual threat quarterback. He is a pure passer in his own mind. So, I think he'll be fine.
Well, if he doesn't want to be viewed like that, then he shouldn't run people over like a linebacker. They're running the ball more effectively than anyone else.
Anybody else?
Anybody since Tebow. So, yeah, no, I agree, though. I do think he wants to be more of that guy. But his physical tools are still pretty remarkable.
Undeniable,
and so, speaking of quarterback, Tulane down their top 2 quarterbacks due to the portal. One has already committed to Duke, and so they'll be down a couple.
I thought the second guy was playing, though. He's starting because he wants to get some film.
For the
portal, but he's playing for Tulane because he's only taking a handful of snaps for them or whatever. So he wants some game film. So down 2, but one's playing.
A little bit better, playing with their backup quarterback against a defense that has been really good lately. Like I will say, Tulane's starter plays in this game. I might like them to kind of keep it close because, they kind of view it as like the Super Bowl, right? Like, we can take down Florida. Without him, that's why I really like UF to just beat the brakes off of them if UF plays and plays well, which I kind of expect them to because of all the things we've talked about, Lagway, the mentality, that nobody opting out. If he was playing, though, their offense is really good. They nearly beat Oklahoma. They nearly beat Kansas State. They're a really good team. But having to play a backup against a UF defense that, again, has been really good down the stretch seems pretty daunting for Tulane.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's this is a big ask for them. And I'll be interested to look, like we said, they're starting quarterbacks opting out. I'd love to look down the rundown and see who else is opting out, because they will have guys that are looking to kind of jump to larger programs. And is the risk of injury against an SEC team that is hungry worth it to probably get the brakes beat off you? I don't know. But I'll be interested to see that as well. But I'm just glad Florida doesn't have any opt-outs. But I agree. This is a hard ask for Tulane. Okay. So one more time, guys, I so appreciate you turning into a peek inside SEC football. TJ and I have been talking about this channel for a long time. We are old friends that love arguing college football with each other. So make sure that you are subscribed to this channel. It's an easy way to support us. We're going to have lots of new content coming your way. We are excited for the playoffs. We're excited for all these bowl games and, all this transfer portal talk that is going to be going on right now. Okay, speaking of success in the transfer portal, Cam Ward, one of the most successful stories out of the transfer portal last year, I would say. He made some headlines lately, but he said that the playoff sweet spot would be somewhere between 16 and 24 teams. TJ, do you agree?
I mean, as somebody who doesn't like the 12 team, no. I don't want to see it expand any more than it already has. I don't like the idea of this. Like, I think people always say, like, oh, look at the FCS and look at, you get down to Division II and everything else. Like, they love to say that, and they love that crutch of like, oh, look at this, it's working for them. Yeah. Is it really working for them? Because one played 16, and every game in the FCS this weekend was a blowout. Like, none of them were close. None of them were competitive. And do you really, like, who is ranked 20th right now in the country? Like, do you really need to see Oregon play that team? Does that really, like, and there's only one way that could happen, and that is the regular season being shortened. They're not going to push this thing out past the Super Bowl by having 6 rounds. And so, I'm not a huge fan of the idea of this. I don't particularly, it is going to expand. Let's be very real with ourselves. Like, it is going to go to 14.
The 20th team is Colorado. So just...
Okay, so Colorado would be fun. I'll take that back. I'd take but I mean, Colorado couldn't beat Kansas, and Coach Prime's fun to watch, and Hunter's a great player. Sure. Do you really need to see them play Oregon? I mean, like, I know Colorado's a different team they were last year, but
No.
I mean, Oregon beat them by 1 billion last year. I don't need to see that, right?
Yeah.
And I don't
I don't
need to
even need to
see
see some of the games we are seeing. I like
for
12
sure.
was too many for me, but I just feel like it's like Cam Ward, sure, you want your participation trophy because you're sitting at number 16. Like I don't know. I don't think we need to see it expand anymore. I think that we have an incredible regular season, and that's part of what makes our sport unique and special is that every game matters. And I was concerned going to 12 would negate the every game mattering, motto that college football has. I certainly think if it goes to 16 or God forbid 24, that you are going to that's going to happen. I don't need to see a whole bunch of teams with 4 losses in the playoffs. I just don't. And I mean, I don't know. I think it's funny coming from a Miami guy too, because all you're doing is inviting more SEC teams into the playoff. You're going
For
to end
sure.
up with,
Yeah.
6 of the top 8 being SEC teams. And then we're going to hear about SEC bias from that. I don't know. I don't need it.
Yeah. I got a comment about this today. Somebody told me like, well, 50% of the NBA gets into the playoff and 50% of the NHL. And I think it's like 40% of the NFL, and it's a smaller percentage the MLB has the wild cards now. And so it's a really large number in the MLB too. And you know what all those have in common? Regular seasons that just don't matter, that you just don't care about. Like the Bucks at one point, now I think they've won 5 in a row or 4 in a row. And so they're kind of hot, but the Bucks at one time were like 3-5. And like you could have completely tuned out to the first 8 Bucks games, and all of a sudden they're leading the division, right? And I watched the NBA twice, once on Christmas Day and once in the playoffs. And the same thing with the NHL. Like I'll catch the Lightning here or there, but it doesn't matter. None of it matters until you get to the playoffs, right? And so the thing that all those sports have in common is that their regular seasons just largely don't matter. There's so much room for error. You get if you're Golden State, you're going to make it every year, right? Are you the 1 seed or the 7 seed? I don't know, but just the fighting for that, like it's just not important to watch. And so you're right. Like but even this year with the 12 team playoff, like we had a year where Alabama had 2 losses to Vandy and Tennessee. And Vandy and Tennessee early. Yeah. And those losses didn't matter at all. Like they did not, like there was no cost to losing to Vanderbilt, right? Yeah. And for Texas lost both games to the same opponent, and they still ended up with the 5 seed.
Potentially going to see them a third time. Like
it's just like wild. It did. Now, are the games still fun? Do we still watch them? Absolutely. But I do think that in 5 years, maybe this is a hot take. In 5 years, for these, this is just year 1 of it, right? And so we all we're still in the same.
And the numbers show that it's more popular than it has ever been, even though there are, the talking heads, us sitting here saying like, we don't love this format, but viewership says everybody loves it right now.
Everyone still loves it, but in 5 years, when you've got 3 and 4 lost teams getting to the playoff, will you care as much about that Tennessee Bama matchup? Now, if you're a fan of one of those teams, or we'll care.
That's the thing. How many big, think about rivalry weekend, right? How many times in just the course of you and I's lifetime has Florida and Florida State played to potentially keep each other out of a national championship game or a Sugar Bowl or, something that really mattered, a lot, right? That is, and that kind of goes away with the way the playoff is. There's not going to be one loss isn't keeping anybody out. So if you've run the table, maybe you can ruin a perfect season, but that end of the game, you've won every single game. You're going into rivalry weekend with those playoffs in sight. That game doesn't matter because if you win or lose, you're going to be in anyway. And that's a weird concept.
Yeah. The Georgia Tech game was completely meaningless this year. Right, like it did not mean anything.
Coolest college football games I've ever seen, but yes,
it was amazing, and the result literally meant nothing to the sport. Clemson, South Carolina meant absolutely nothing to the sport this year. Yeah, and so I think that now are the games still fun? Will we still enjoy? Yeah, I'm not saying any of that goes away, but just the living and dying with every moment. Remember how those Alabama LSU games felt through the 2000s, and you knew that the loser of that game was out, and the winner out, and minus the 1 year, the winner of that game was probably going to the national championship.
Yeah.
That importance of that game, even people were even talking about it with Georgia, Alabama this year. Yeah,
Yeah.
this game's important, but the loser just has the best loss in the country and the winner has the best win. Like
Yeah.
that's all that matters. And then they said the same thing for Ohio State, Oregon the next weekend.
Yeah.
So I don't know. The importance does feel like it's losing its luster. And again, Cam Ward to me just kind of sounds like sour grapes. Like it sounds like, it should be 16 because we got, we didn't take care of our business.
Trophy is in the mail.
Yeah. You're right, though. It would benefit SEC teams. Just looking at the final playoff rankings, obviously the ones we mentioned, Georgia, Texas, Tennessee would be in, Alabama would be in, Ole Miss would be in, South Carolina, that's 5. And then Missouri would be in at 19. And then, I guess that would be it. I guess they didn't rank anybody else that high. But yeah, I mean, they'd have 6 teams in.
A lot of
right?
teams, yeah.
And so, yeah, if they want to do that, this idea that like, oh, we should expand. I think people thought that when we expand the playoffs, it'll help the little guy, which
it doesn't. The end result's going to be the same.
Yeah,
the little guy just gets a seat at the table for one round, essentially,
Right.
is what it is.
Unless you're going to give, and they would never do this, unless you're going to give 24 teams and you give everybody gets 4 teams in, which would be so stupid. We don't need to do this. It's just going to benefit the SEC and the Big Ten more anyway.
Well, that's the thing. I don't think whether we have a 4-team playoff or a 12-team playoff or a 24-team playoff, it more than likely, I don't believe, is going to change the Final Four or the final championship game. I think the cream rises to the top. Excuse me. We know this, right? And it just gives us some more lopsided games at the beginning.
Yeah, and it almost could create the TCU effect, where it was great that TCU got in and won their first game, and then they go to the national championship and lose by 60.
Yeah.
Like, do we really need to see that? Like, this isn't.
Call that the Notre Dame effect generally, but
we'll see how they do this week. We'll preview it on Wednesday night. Let's close this thing out and get out of here.
All right, sounds good, guys. Make sure if you are watching right now or you're watching it later on that you are subscribed to this channel, A Peek Inside SEC Football. We want to hear your thoughts below too, and what do you want to hear us talk about? Do you want to hear more about the playoffs? Do you want to hear more about recruiting? You want to hear about the transfer portal? Let us know. Hit us up in the comments, and we can't wait to talk to you on Wednesday.